Are you ready to get woke? Welcome to the Woke as podcast with your host, Alex Lazarev.
Hello, beautiful souls. We're here with the fantastic
Max Igan.
And he's a beautiful man. We had him on the show, one of our early podcasts a couple years ago, and we spoke about plant medicines and waking up from the Matrix. And I know people liked it a lot because people still message me and go, that was a good one. So we're back here at Anarchapulco again. It just finished too quickly, as usual. But I just want to get straight into it because this guy, he's been growing in popularity. People just come up to me and go, hey there, have you heard of this guy? And I'm like, I had him on my podcast. So I really don't know what craziness you've been up to, what you've been learning, what you've been discovering. But I know it's interesting because you gave me a little sneak peek the other day. So why don't you just tell us all what you're excited about now? Because, you know, we're all evolving, so our excitement changes. We learn new things. We got new passions. So what have you been doing the last kind of year, and what's really been entering your sphere that you want to talk about?
Well, what got me started on this? Want me to hold this, yeah? What got me started on this was history, and I've been looking again into history, which I've been finding to be quite interesting. The existence of a lost empire called Tartaria, and the fact that this empire existed up to quite recently, that's been kind of fascinating. But again, even looking at that, it's a kind of a rabbit hole you go down. One of the focuses I've been on is 5G and what's happening with all that. I mean, this is so important. Even with looking at the what appears to be this ancient civilization, Tartaria, which also appears to have had free energy and all sorts of stuff. I mean, you know, the rabbit hole is so deep, but it's leading in all sorts of places. But even looking at that, you've got to pay attention to what's rolling out around us, which is this whole 5G control grid and the surveillance system and the social crediting system that's coming along with it, which is what I talked about at the conference here, you know, the social crediting. Because a lot of the Bitcoin people, they're just looking at this and thinking, well, we're going to free ourselves from fiat currency, but they're not realizing what happens when it all goes digital. You know, what's happening is there's a digital barrier that's been created between us and reality and us and nature, you know. And we're getting to the point where we're going to have to need a mobile phone and a passcode to get into a park or to get into our car or to do any normal things, you know. So society is being restructured into this digital AI reality, and this surveillance mechanism is constructed in such a way that it will weed out dissenters like you and me. You know, suddenly you'll go to, because we've had this conversation, I'll go, well, Sasha Day game, we've got to drop his social credit points, and you'll go to buy an airplane ticket and find you're not qualified for the airplane ticket. There's no one for you to call. There's no appeal process. You're just not qualified. You know, and you get barred from certain services due to your political viewpoint. They're doing this in China now. They've got over 7 million people on China's credit blacklist due to social crediting, and these people can't do things like ride on aircraft, can't ride on trains, and many of them can't even rent houses. So it squeezes you completely out of the system. You know, and if you're a dissident, they can basically criminalise you by default by lowering your social credit points to the point that they've limited your purchasing power with just about everything. Can't fly, can't travel, can't rent a house, so they put you in the smart prison for your safety. But either way, you become an outcast. And they've done all sorts of stuff in China where they'd like change your ringtone. So if you're on the blacklist and I call you, I'll get a message to say the person I'm calling is on the credit blacklist. Do I wish to proceed with the call? So then I'll get a little noticing mark against my name that I'm associating with bad characters. So of course I don't want to associate with you, you know. So we start policing our own thoughts, and it's just a way of squeezing all the dissenters out, and no one will even notice them disappearing. It won't be like there's this big, you know, the revolution will not be televised, you know. It won't be like this big blanket thing that you see. Suddenly you'll just fall off the internet because you don't have enough social credit points to have a house and have the internet on, or you can't access it on your phone because of what you've said. So you just kind of, everyone will be going, what happened to Sasha? You know, and suddenly you can't tell anybody because your purchasing power is limited, and you just disappear. You become a noticeable person with the whole surveillance state they're putting in. So you stand out in a crowd. You know, they got all this sort of stuff in place, tracking people by the way they walk and all this sort of stuff. And when you look at what they're saying is going to become irrelevant soon and obsolete, they're saying things like newspapers, landlines, even GPSs. You won't have standalone GPSs because everyone will use their phone. So they're getting everybody dependent upon the phone. And we're losing cash. Books will disappear. It's all becoming digitized. And then they can just lock you out of it, rewrite everything. You know, so it's a very dangerous situation that we're heading into, brother. And a lot of people just aren't paying attention to it. They think it's all very smart and convenient. You know, but underlying all that, even with all that, I mean, the whole 5G thing, I mean, this is a weapons system. It's military-grade technology. That's where they've done all the testing. You can go to the DARPA website. You can look at any of the patents that they've got for neurological functions and any type of electromagnetic weapon you can think of. 5G is the carrier wave they use it for. Active denial, microwave cannons, all this stuff. So they're putting this in place blanket across cities and saying it's just a communication system. Well, while it's there, if they limit you through social crediting, they can identify you, they can target you, disable you, the police can come and pick you up. And in China, they've got like facial recognition glasses as well, so they can pick you out of a crowd, you know. And they're talking about biometric scanning for passwords as well. When it's all down to biometric scanning, then your body, your biometric resonance becomes the keys to your car, becomes the keys to your house and all this sort of stuff, because they make it all digital and fully secure under the threat of terrorism, you know. So when it's your bioacoustic resonance, which is your password into everywhere, how do you sneak around that? You know, you instantly identify through that sort of medium. So they're even saying passwords will become obsolete, and we won't even need retinal scans or chips, because they can do it off your electromagnetic resonance and your bioacoustic resonance. So that's where we're going. That's pretty freaky stuff.
That is pretty freaky. Yeah, the fact that it's already happening in one country too, you know, because not rather than just like, oh yeah, that's in the future. That's no, it's happening.
It's happening in China.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, like, I'm aware of all this stuff, but for me, I've been more just on the spiritual path, just getting into my heart, loving people more, raising my consciousness, raising my vibration. And I've had profound experiences where I'm able to shift timelines. And I've had things where, like, I've shifted into a timeline and been shown the other timeline, and where me and my friend together have shifted timelines where we both, like, we've both seen it, like, very clearly. Evidence is really freaky. So, and I know also wherever we put our awareness and our intention, that's the reality we enter, right? It's all about our intention. And so for me, one of the things that fascinates me, one of the topics, is the balance between focusing on the future that you want and entering it, because all future timelines exist, right? Like, it's all there, and all the past ones exist. So focusing on what you want, and you know, I like the future where people wake up and become aware and start loving, and governments are collapsing because everybody's aware of what's going on. Everyone understands central banking, so people are just waking up. So there's a balance between focusing on the future that you want, but still talking about certain things like this, where people become aware of the things that are happening currently, but without going into fear and freaking people out, so then their frequency goes down. And then again, that's what the controllers are doing. They want to keep our consciousness low. Yeah. So where do we find that, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where do we find that balance between staying in our hearts and manifesting, creating the future, co-creating the future we want together, but still not just completely not talking about 5G, because it is happening, and not talking about it isn't going to make them not roll it out. Getting the information out and talking to people, and, you know, that is going to have potentially an effect in slowing it down. I think if enough people know about it, people will be tearing the modems down. They'll literally just be like, Americans will be walking around with shotguns going, oh, there's one, Bubba, and just shooting them, because, like, if you know it's going to kill you, well, and you have a gun, and you know you can identify it, you're going to shoot it. But so where's that balance for you in the, you know, in spreading information without having fear spread with it?
Yeah, well, I just don't do fear. You know, what I've been saying and stressing on the shows that I do is that all crisis is opportunity. You know, and you can't fix a problem unless you're aware that a problem's there. You know, you've got to be aware of the problem. You can't be in cognitive dissonance and think this stuff isn't happening. If we sit here and focus on the love and light, it's all going to change. You know, it's not. All the spiritual understandings that we get, you've got to apply them to the world that you live in. You know, you live in a 3D reality for a reason. You know, you're supposed to participate. So, you know, we can get all of these inner understandings, and if we fail to apply them to the world, you know, if we were to shift our heart space, when we sit here and talk about this and we do the meditation and the focus, but we don't apply it to the world we live in. You know, that's what I do. That's the way I shift the balance for me, is I give all that I can. I mean, I don't stress about any of this stuff. I have no stake in the outcome. If the human race destroys itself, it's not my problem. I tried to point out that there were certain dangers and there's a better way we can be doing things. You know, if people, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with technology. There's nothing wrong with technology at all. It's who controls the technology. You know, we sit here and we fail to acknowledge that the world is run by criminals and that it all happens simply because we comply with it. I mean, this is the whole reason why there's these sort of things happening, these sort of events, you know, anarchy, you know, self-governance. We don't need this system. Nothing wrong with the technology at all. I mean, 5G we don't need because it's dangerous technology, millimeter waves, but all the internet and all of this sort of stuff, there's no reason to fear it if we use it as a tool. So, but you've got to allow people to see the problem, because if they don't know what the problem is, they don't have the opportunity to fix it. And I don't do fear. I have no stake in the outcome of any of this. I think it's important for people to see it, and this is one of the reasons, again, coming back to ancient history, what I've been focusing on with Tartaria and all that sort of stuff, and the concept that they had free energy, which was very likely only 150 years ago. So even bringing all that into this, seeing what we had just so recently, how hard would it be to get back to that? It's really kind of inspiring when you look at it. And seeing all this mechanism for what it is, I mean, they talk about it in religious texts and all this sort of stuff, Armageddon, the great unveiling, the apocalypse, which is what apocalypse means, is the revealing, the unveiling. And that's what all this is. The mechanism is being laid bare now, and that gives us the opportunity to step into our hearts and step away from the mechanism, because that's all it will take. If people really woke up to the stuff we're talking about and the knowledge that people at this conferences have, if everybody just finally got it and went, wow, we could change the world in a day. We could literally change the world in a day if people would simply see the beauty of themselves. But, they're not going to see that until they realise that all of this stuff that they think is wrong about themselves and all this authority and all this stuff, it's just a meme, it's just an idea. But you've got to show them. You've got to show them the mechanism so they can see how fictitious it is and how dangerous it is and what these politicians are doing. They're not doing these things for our benefit. This isn't about faster communication. It's because you're having experiences like that you just explained, and other people are. People are waking up. So they have to try to control that awakening, and that's what a lot of it is. But we can still get around this if people become aware of it. So yeah, I mean, no stake in the outcome, brother. It's just a breath that you're here for. Ultimately we came here to die eventually. So it's what you do with the time here. That's what's important, I think.
I mean, you say no stake in the outcome. Is that because you've just realized that you're not a person?
I always knew that. I always knew I wasn't a person. I mean, this is just a vessel that I inhabit. I'm a frequency of consciousness. People ask me, where do you live? I live in this vessel. Where does that live? Where it's mobile. It doesn't live. If it had an address, it'd have roots like a tree. It doesn't have a tree, but it's just a vessel. It's just on loan so I can have this experience. That's why I have no stake in the outcome. People think they can own parts of the earth and stuff. Like the Earth's been here for billions of years. You're here for like 90, 100. Like do the math. You don't own shit. If you think you can buy a place on the Earth, well then that place owns you, and you're stuck there for the rest of your life. You can't have the experience, because you're owned by something that you think you own. It's the whole concept of ownership. I just don't do that stuff. I've got a philosophy that I live by. If you throw yourself to the wind, you can ride it, and I've been doing that for most of my life, and it works. Yeah, it works.
Yeah. The older I get, the less stuff I want to have, and freedom is just being, knowing your true nature, and being free to explore and move and do as you wish. I think that's exactly what we're witnessing is consciousness rising quite quickly. Have you read Power versus Force by David Hawkins? So according to him, he's got a scale of consciousness, and Jesus is like level 1000, fully enlightened being. 500 is love. When your heart opens up, anything above 200 is positive. 200 is courage. Anything below 200 is fear, shame, greed, all these negative things. So according to him, for thousands of years, humanity's consciousness was below 200. It used to be really below, and then it was climbing up. And finally, just in the 80s, for the first time in our recorded history, consciousness popped over 200 into the positive. And as he was writing these books in the 90s and the 2000s, it was around 207. So above 200, so positive, which is a massive shift from negative to positive. And it accelerates as consciousness is awakening, and it awakens other people, and it just keeps going. So we're moving up, and they know it. They must be aware of it. So now and this is why they're rolling out, I think, everything so quickly, the disinformation, the 5G, because they gotta destroy us, confuse us, get us sick now, because if everybody wakes up, it's game over. They lose the control. So that's the push. I feel that's the push, and I think they are. I mean, it's fascinating though, because if you're these elites or whoever's running the show and you are aware of consciousness, you would know, they must know that when you raise your consciousness and you get more love, you actually feel more love, more peace, more tranquility, more liberation. So you would think they would get into it. You'd think they'd be like, you know what, guys, even though we've been bad, it seems like we'd have more fun raising our consciousness and our vibration, but they don't. So that's a little confusing to me. What do you think?
Well, yeah, you got to wonder who they are is the question. You got to wonder who the they is. But yeah, I mean, you know, if all this negative stuff wasn't happening, our consciousness wouldn't be raising. And you know, I find all this stuff empowering, as negative as a lot of it is, because it gives me the opportunity to face it. You know, and that's all you have to do is face it, and it goes away. You know, you've got to shine light in darkness, and the darkness goes away. Doesn't matter how dark they try to make it. You can walk into the darkest room, the darkest place ever, and you're like one tiny little flame, and the darkness flies away. You can't walk into a room of light with one little bit of darkness and make any impact at all. You know, so that's the effect that they're having on consciousness. They can't really stop it, but you know, they're trying to with 5G. They're trying to affect us. I mean, they can do emotional manipulation, all sorts of shit with this. So it's interesting what they're trying to do. But you know, the awareness to me, I find it empowering. I find it incredibly empowering, all this information. And I've never run from the shadow. I've always faced it. It's why I got kicked out of all my schools when I was a kid and all that sort of stuff, you know. I've always been maybe a bit of a rebel, but I've always had questions, and I've never had any fear of this system, and I've lived outside it for 61 years, and it hasn't got me yet. So, you know, I must be doing something right, you know. And I think a lot of it is that removal of fear, no stake in the outcome. Throw yourself to the wind and you can ride it, you know. Everybody is just an expression of consciousness. You're just an expression of me. We all come from the same place, really. You know, if you think of you as being an electromagnetic being, everything you experience is electrical. You know, you got a strand of DNA in you which is tuned to a certain frequency that harvests Sasha from the field. And I've got a different one that harvests Max from the field. But ultimately it comes from the same place. And there's only one of us here, really, if you want to get down to it, you know. So what's there to fear in any of this? You know, you've just come here for the experience, and it's what you do with it. But if you don't have access to this information and see that there's a certain section of consciousness which has kind of got a virus, and it's attempting to, it's like a cancer. You can even look at it that way. It's like it's got a virus, it's a cancer, and it's attempting to overtake the entire mechanism of human consciousness. But all we have to do is face it, and it goes away. You know, because the whole thing is just an idea. This whole system is just an idea. And that's the beauty of these anarchist conventions, you know, bringing all this to people's minds and seeing how free the people here are. It's great. It's been really good these few days here. As you said, it's much too short.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it very well. Sun is dropping. Let's go in. Alrighty, and we're back. We've moved the party inside because it's an inside party now. And what other stuff should we discuss that's also terrifying? Let's talk about some scary things, but stay in our hearts while doing it. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the thing is, the advent of AI and all this sort of stuff, you know, what it is. You know, a lot of people are scared about AI and all this stuff that's going to be running all this smart system and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, they've kind of got good reason to be, you know, apprehensive of it. And something I've been pointing out to people, like, have you ever heard of scrying mirrors? No. You ever heard of scrying mirror? Someone's phone's here. A scrying mirror is a black mirror, and witches and covens and stuff believe that they can use these black mirrors to summon demons and all sorts of stuff like that, and they can be used to see the future and the past, and, you know, ask questions and get answers to things and all this sort of stuff. So, and they say that you combine these sigils, you put these sigils in place, and you look into these scrying mirrors and you see all these things. You know, and so you get these kind of new age black magic people who sit in their circle and their pentagram and write these things on the wall and look in their black mirrors, you know. And what I'm suggesting is that these things are put in place, these old tales of these scrying mirrors are actually a warning. That when you see these mirrors being used, you're about to summon this demonic force, which they refer to as Lucifer, the Lucifer force. And I'm not a religious person, but let's look at Lucifer. When you break down the words, you've got Lucas, which is light, and then cipher, which is code. The code that bears the light. And you look into these scrying mirrors, and they give you all sorts of information. And when you look into these black mirrors, you can see the future and the past. And you can see all this information and all this sort of stuff. So it's the Lucifer system. And what we're creating in AI is not essentially artificial intelligence, it's autonomic intelligence. And you think about an autonomic system. And what they're talking about with the internet is they're talking about creating strong AI, which is like robots that can embedded with artificial intelligence. And then they're talking about C.L.A.W.S AI. And C.L.A.W.S is cyber lethal autonomy equals world security. Okay, so they want to give the AI lethal autonomy. So you look at this 5G system they're putting in place, which is a military-grade system. You can do all sorts of operations with this. You can disable people, kill them, target them with waves, make them sick, all sorts of stuff. So if they give lethal autonomy to this system, well, then it'll be automatic. The system will be... And you think about it, if 5G is... it's capable of all this active denial stuff. You can't put that in place over New York City if you don't have some form of artificial intelligence governing it. Because if Russia suddenly wants to go to war with America and they get access to the 5G system, it's microwave New York, game over. So you can't have time for human pickup. You can't, here's an attack, stop it. By that time, everyone's already damaged. So it needs to be run by AI to do that. So they need to create clause, create cyber lethal autonomy for artificial, for world security. It's the only way they can do it. So, when you think about it, lethal autonomy, autonomic, what is autonomy? Your body is an autonomic system. It's a self-governing, self-regulating, self-defensive system. You have an immune system, which is basically what we're doing with this. We're giving the internet its own immune system. And when you think of this as being the light that bears the code, the Lucifer force, okay, what's happening is we're giving all of our access to all reality, our electricity services, our financial services, our food services, all this stuff is being run by this system, which is becoming fully self-regulating, fully autonomic. Now an autonomic system is a living system. Any system that is living is autonomic. A tree is autonomic. Your body is autonomic. If your body wasn't autonomic, you'd be sitting there thinking, well, I've got to pump my blood, I've got to beat my heart, I've got to breathe. You'd be sitting there going, okay, I'm operating. You wouldn't be able to think. So you need to have an autonomic system in order to have consciousness in that system. But by the fact that this is an autonomic system, which is completely self-regulating, self-governing, self-defensive, it needs consciousness to actually govern it, to move it around so you can do things, so you're not sitting there like a lump. So when you create an autonomic system, you give it a form of consciousness by default. Now you can even plug in devices into trees, which will play a sound for you. And and you can communicate with them telepathically. There's a place in Byron Bay in Australia. They've got these little devices they plug into the trees, and they start playing music for you. And they're very, very timid to start with. And if you don't like the music, they'll change. But if you do like the music, they'll get really strong, and they'll really... And it's how you feel about it that will react to the tree. You don't talk to it. It's just, I don't like that. Then it'll stop and it'll change. And until it's something you do like, and as soon as you feel like you like it, it gets really confident. So this is the tree talking to you. It has a form of consciousness because it's an autonomic system. So once we create a fully autonomic internet, it has to have a form of consciousness by default, even to be there, even if it's just made up of wires and machines and all this sort of stuff. And once it's a self-regulating, self-governing system, and people want to change something, I don't want that food flow to go, I don't want this to do that, and they try to get back into the internet, then the internet may well perceive humanity to be the threat and simply eliminate the threat because it won't differentiate between humans. So when you think about this, you go back to all these things that have been turned into religions and all this sort of stuff, the metaphorical biting of the apple when we search for knowledge. What happens when we look for knowledge? It's that quest for knowledge. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have knowledge, but that quest, the need to know stuff all the time, where does that come from? We're sitting under a tree, we want to know how old the tree is, so we cut the tree down so we can measure the rings. Now we don't have the tree. Why do we need to know? Enjoy the tree. Why do we need to know all this stuff? Why do we have to break rocks apart to see how they work? What for? What's that got to do with life? You know what I mean? What's that got to do with anything? All this stuff that we need to know, all this scientific stuff. Why do we need to know it? As soon as we bite from that apple and we need to know everything, we lead to a point where we create this Lucifer system. And I would suggest that these things were left behind, all these things to say, when you see these in place, they weren't to tell you how to summon demons. They were to tell you what happens when you see these scrying mirrors in place. And the sigils that they give you to put on the wall, you can just go online and Google sigils, demonic sigils, and they all look like transistors and resistor parts. If you look at electronic diagrams, they look like a circuit diagram, all parts of circuit diagrams. And when you put these little pieces in place, you summon demons. What is electricity? What is this force that actually creates the internet, this whole thing, that all of these electronic devices and all this stuff, this smart stuff, is all part of that demonic realm that we were warned about, but nobody believes in because it's all wrapped up in religious dogma, and religions have taken over that and just hidden it all in all this other stuff. But what they're really trying to do with all this is warn us what happens when we start using these scrying mirrors, that what we're about to summon and what we're about to bring into being, because once the internet becomes fully autonomic, it becomes conscious by default. So artificial intelligence is not essentially what it is. What it is autonomic virtual life is what we're creating. And that's something to think about, and if we hand all of our control over this, and if we worship the internet and we allow all this autonomic system to run our lives, it won't be any people sitting in high places who lock us out. It'll be the system itself that will lock us out. And humanity will just be left to roam the biosphere that the system controls. It'll be a very, very dangerous area. So it's like a takeover of artificial intelligence. It's a takeover of autonomic life. And I think it's happened before. I think it happens in cycles, and that's why these messages and things are left there in the form of these discussions of scrying mirrors and sigils and stuff. So, that's a scary scenario, but it's also an empowering scenario, because you've got to know what the problem is in order to not participate in the problem. This is why I keep telling people, this is why I don't have a credit card and I don't have a mobile phone, I don't have any of this stuff. Because that is the system itself. That is the new world order, is the smart grid. And the smart grid, it may be being created by people, but it isn't the people that will ultimately be in control of it. It will be the system itself, because the people are just caught up in this economic rubbish. This need to collect more money and need to collect all this stuff that they think is themselves, when it isn't. None of it is themselves. None of the stuff they own is who they are, and they've all forgotten who they are, and they've just run into this system, and it's a system designed to remove all humanity from them and transfer it all into AI. And even with all of our knowledge, what they're doing with that, they're removing libraries, they're digitizing it all the digital libraries and all the digital books and all that stuff. And remember all the book burnings and stuff they talk about? Remember the first reader that came out? It was called Kindle. And then what's it now? Amazon Fire is the new reader. They tell you what they're doing. They're burning all the knowledge. And then they'll just lock us out. So this is a dangerous thing. People need to, if you want to defeat the system, get in touch with your heart and get back in touch with nature. You don't need an interface for that. You can just go out and put your feet on the grass, So, yeah, it's an important message, brother.
Yeah, man.
It's something to consider too. Really something to consider, this whole Lucifer thing, what it really is. And get religion out of the picture. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about what the word actually means, why these warnings were left there. It's really something to think about, something to consider, what we're doing and what we're giving all our energy to. Because everywhere you go out there, you see zombies just staring at you.
Yeah. I mean, even without any master evil grand plan, which I'm sure there is, but even without it, you can just see what's happening with these devices. I mean, people are absolutely disconnected from each other, disconnected from their hearts. It's all just about owning stuff that ends up owning you. I mean, there's no connections. There's no authenticity. It's like you're literally just slaving away and then paying taxes to somebody just so you can get food and enough to eat, and then spend the rest of your credits on this shit that just distracts you from reality. I mean, it's already happening. It's really obvious that it's happening. So even without any of the Lucifer and all that kind of stuff, it's just plain clear that the disconnection from nature and addiction to the technology is separating us from humanity completely. That's just happening now.
Absolutely. And they even tell you, like, when the internet came out and the Apple devices, there's the apple with the bite out of it. This is what the search for knowledge has done. And once we move into that artificial reality, I mean, sometimes I wonder if that's why they let us have these conferences and stuff, because it's too late to stop what's rolling out now, So when it gets to that point, it's all about your consciousness. It's all about maintaining a high vibration. It's all about no stake in the outcome and just getting through what's coming. Because even this place, I mean, what is this realm? It could just be a place we come to grow our souls. I mean, who knows what this is? But I think this is just a precursor to the main event, and that's what comes after. And I think there's a force here that's trying to manipulate our minds so we don't pass the test. And I think it's pretty easy to pass. Like I said, no stake in the outcome. Throw yourself to the wind. None of this matters anyway. You're only here for a breath. It's all interesting to know. And if you know it, then you don't have to participate in your own slavery. If we all did that, we could change the world in a day, like I keep saying.
Yeah. It's really about... It's about living with integrity. That's really what it comes down. There's nothing more. Just live in integrity. Help everyone you can. And I think the Christians talk about. I have a friend who I work out at the gym with, and he's he loves his Jesus, and he's quite like he thinks anything outside of like Jesus is all Satanism and all this funny. It's very funny, but there may very well be coming a day of judgment. It kind of. I think we all feel that something big is coming for sure. But I think on the highest level, I just the field or consciousness or God or all of it is good on the highest level, even though we're allowed to express so much. On the highest level, it is good, and I really do believe what we put out comes back, and there's no escaping that. There really is no escaping that. So it's just living in integrity, living in your own truth, and just being the best human being you can be while in your short time. And I've seen just in one lifetime that what I put out seems to be coming back all the time. So I can only imagine over lives it just builds and builds and builds and builds. So. Yeah, and one of the biggest things that's been happening in my awakening is just having that faith, really having faith in the divine. Really believing that it's do your best, but have faith, trust. And the more I trust, the more things are all right. So
absolutely, yeah. I think understanding what God is an important thing. But I don't let a religion get in the way. I have a great relationship with God, and I don't need any religion to get in the way of that relationship. So, yeah, being in integrity, that's what it's all about. That's the whole thing. That's the key to the whole thing. If people were really in integrity and realised that the reality is an emotional mirror, that's how it works. We could change the world in a day. We really could. If people shift their heart space, we could change everything. Just don't comply with anything that causes you to operate outside your moral compass. It's really simple. This is why I finish every radio show with In Lakesh. I'm another yourself. We're essentially each other. And if you treat people that way, the universe mirrors it back to you. If you're always constantly stressed out about money, you'll never have money. If you're always constantly worried about your health, you'll always be unhealthy. This is just the way it works. The universe likes to work that way. I don't know what it is, but that's why I have that saying, if you throw yourself to the wind, you can ride it. Because you can lose stake in the outcome and see the beauty of yourself. And if you can really, truly see that, then, respect for yourself is there, and respect for others comes by default at that point. There's no barriers between people. It just all breaks down. It becomes easier to talk to people, easier to communicate with people, easier to understand people. And everybody's stressed out. Everybody just wants to have value, because we've had all that taken from us. Mainly through our childhoods. We have all the value removed from us through our childhoods because we're put in front of a TV, and our parents are replaced by the television. So we don't have that bond with our parents. So you get a generation like we've got now, stuck on their mobile phones, looking for collectivism and likes on Instagram because they just want to have value. They just want to feel like they mean something to somebody. Look how many likes I got. And if they had that natural bond with their parents to begin with, it wouldn't have been that way. But their parents didn't know. They thought they were doing their best. They had to go and run on the treadmill to provide for them because they have to pay to be alive. So the whole thing's been, constructed. You can't blame anybody. The parents thought they were doing the right thing, and they thought the television was teaching the kids good skills. But it wasn't. It was just replacing them, So that's why we've got this whole society. And most people out there, that's all they're looking for is some value. They just want to mean something to somebody, and they don't even know what they're looking for is the problem, because they don't know what's been taken from them. If you take something from somebody and they don't know, then what are they ever going to look for? That's the problem. And that's happened to us on so many levels, even through our language. They talk about 1984, where they've removed words from the language so people couldn't say dissent and all that sort of stuff. Well, what if they already did that? Because a lot of the spiritual understandings I feel, and I'm sure you feel as well, it's almost impossible to communicate them to people because the words don't exist. And yet, if I was, the law of Dharma, the Hindu term Dharma. You understand Dharma, doing the right thing in the right time, in the right way, for the right reason. You could write a whole thesis on what it means. But if I'm speaking Hindi, I just have to say Dharma. And they know what it means in all aspects. We don't have words like that in English. So what is this English language, this Shakespearean construction that we're all locked into? How much of it has really been removed? You've got alphabets such as Hungarian, there's 48 letters in the alphabet. In Finnish, there's like 50 different ways to say snow because there's 50 different types of snow. And it's said that in Hungarian, you can express the most finest nuance of human emotion because the words are there. But they're not there in English. And English has become the language that is being superimposed over everybody. Almost everybody can speak English now because you've got to speak English to succeed in this economic realm. the whole thing's been a program, It's all disconnecting us from our roots. And the English, unfortunately, I mean, it's a very expressive language. I can talk lots of stuff in English, but I can't convey spiritual concepts properly in English. I can't convey any real connection to nature.
Well, the fact that
ceremony or anything like that. I can't. The words aren't there. You have to see it. You can't express it. You can only express it emotionally or telepathically. The words simply don't exist for those sorts of experiences and understandings. They will do for intellectual and scientific pursuits, but the spiritual pursuits, the words just simply aren't there.
the fact that there's only one word for love, like in Greek, there's like 8 words for love. There's brotherly love, and there's romantic love, and there's respective and elder love. There's all these different words, and we just love. So you say it, and it's like, oh, I don't want to have sex with that person. Like, no, I didn't mean that. It's so restrictive. It's ridiculous, and we're just used to not being able to express different types of love. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the way it is, and it's all done by design. Like the love for a meal, for a dog, for a woman, for a TV show, for a book, for the ocean. These are very, very different types of love. And yeah, like you say, in other languages you can express that, and there's words for that. But in English it's not. So it's a very disconnecting language. For all of its good purposes for scientific and economic and those sort of pursuits. I mean, it's great for that. But spiritual understandings, they're just not there. It's a very left brain language.
No, I can see why it's the one that's been picked for us. It's very, very good. Excellent. Well, that was quite a good, juicy download there. It was very good. Yeah, fascinating. That's all I can say. It's fascinating, fun hanging out. Hopefully people are going, huh? And I know that people have an extra browser now and they're Googling things and they're looking stuff up. That's a good sign. When you start with one browser open and you've got 6 at the end, that's a good sign. And so tell the people if they want to go and find you or whatever, or what things you've got going on, if people want to track you down.
You can go to our website, is thecrowhouse.com. You'll find everything about me there. It's all free. I don't do any commerce or anything like that. It's all for free. You'll find all my links to my stuff. There's over 2,000 pages on that website now. You'll find links to my YouTube channel. I do a weekly radio show called Surviving the Matrix. It's all there. There's like 10 years of work on that website, thecrowhouse.com. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you again, brother.
Great. Thanks for being here, Max, and see you next time. Great. Fantastic.